Life isn't easy or fair sometimes. How do you overcome anything, even though the challenges are being thrown at you full speed ahead? We're going to be learning about that today from an ex-hostage negotiator. I have the privilege of speaking with Terry. Terry is a true inspiration. When you feel like the challenges are just too much, I want you to think about Terry, and I want you to remember that mindset is everything. And with the right mindset, you can accomplish anything. Terry is a former athlete. He spent his younger years taking care of his father and grandmother who were fighting with cancer. He worked at Wendy's International and then at the hospital that his family was treated at. At 37 years old, Terry shifted gears, became a police officer and a SWAT hostage negotiator, because it is a reminder that you're never too old to try something new. He also started a security consulting business. Later, he had to slow down and came to a halt as he was also diagnosed with cancer. In 2018, he had his foot amputated, and 2020 his leg, and currently living with tumors in his lungs where he requires clinical treatment on a regular basis. The reason I wanted to talk to Terry is not to feel bad for him, but to instill hope and the zest for life that he has. With the right mindset, the sky is the limit on the things that you can accomplish. Terry, I am so excited to have you here to share your story, and I hope that it'll impact other people as well. I really want to hear about the hostage negotiating part, but we'll leave that for later because I know that's going to be massive for people's families, negotiating and business and so forth. So let's just dive into your story. I want to hear all about it.
Sure. Well, first of all, Deanna, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to this with you. And like you, I hope this makes a positive impact in somebody's life. So a little bit about me. Born on the south side of Chicago. I'm the oldest of three boys. You can't tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall and actually went to college on a basketball scholarship. When I graduated from college, I moved home to find a job. I'm really going to date myself now, but this was long before the internet was available to help people find employment. Fortunately, I found that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department. That was the good news. The bad news was I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. After Wendy's, I actually went to work for the hospital that cared for my father and my grandmother. I thought they did such a great job. I wanted to be part of that. And then at 37, made the major pivot in my life, became a police officer. And as you mentioned, part of what I did during my law enforcement career was I was a SWAT hostage negotiator. After that, started a school security consulting business, coached girls high school basketball. But for the last 13 years now, I've been battling a rare form of cancer, a rare form of melanoma.
Ooh, that's got to be so difficult. So, and your foot was amputated and your leg as well shortly after. Tell us about the process, your mindset. How was that coping with that?
Sure. So when I was diagnosed in 2012, I was told I would be dead in 2 years, that I had a very rare form of melanoma that has nothing to do with sun exposure or anything like that. It's a rare form that appears on the bottom of the feet or the palms of the hands. Mine appeared on the bottom of my left foot. And I thought, well, you gave me a death sentence. Maybe I can try to turn that death sentence into a life sentence. And, you know, I certainly did not like the cards that I was dealt. I absolutely know that when I was diagnosed, I went through all the stages that we would associate with grief. You know, first there was denial. I can't possibly have cancer. I've done everything right in my life. And then there was an anger stage. You know, I can't possibly have this cancer. I've done everything right in my life. And then there was kind of a bargaining with God. Our daughter was in high school at the time. It was like, okay, God, just let me live long enough to see her graduate from high school. And then I absolutely got down, got depressed, felt sorry for myself, and then sort of came out the other end and said, this sucks, but I'm going to have to embrace the suck. You know, I don't like the cards that I've been dealt, but I'm going to have to play these cards to the best of my ability. And that's what I've been trying to do for almost 13 years now.
And I cannot imagine that being easy, having the challenges that you do. Now, I get that it was difficult for you. What about your wife? Now, you've been married 32 years. How was she coping with technically a life sentence? Losing a limb, your lifestyle change. I mean, you're in a wheelchair. There's so much going on. I mean, how's your wife and daughter coping with everything?
I mean, I am lucky I married a stoic Norwegian who's tough as nails, you know, and I'll give you kind of a funny story. After I had my leg amputated and I found out I had these tumors in my lungs, which I still have, my doctor wanted to put me on chemotherapy. And I was 8 years into this fight. And I looked at him and I said, is it going to save my life? He said, probably not, but it might buy you some more time. I said, well, if the outcome's going to be the same, if I'm going to die one way or the other, I would prefer not to go through all that chemotherapy, but I'll go home and talk to my wife and daughter. It's a true story. It really happened this way. So I go home and I start telling my wife and daughter. My daughter was in college. She was home on a break at the time. I start telling them what the doctor wants. My daughter's like, all right, we need a family meeting. I'm like, family meeting? There's 3 of us. It's not like we get a board here or something like that. So we sit around the kitchen table and individually talk about how we all feel about me having chemo. And then when we're done, my daughter's like, all right, let's take a vote. How many people want dad to have chemotherapy? And my wife and daughter raise their hand. I'm like, wait, am I getting outvoted for something that I don't want to do?
Yeah.
But Deanna, I remember when I was in the police academy, our defensive tactics instructor used to have us bring a photograph of the people we loved the most to class. And as we were learning different techniques to defend ourselves, we were to look at that photograph because he reasoned you will fight harder for the people you love than you will fight for yourself. So I ended up taking chemotherapy, not because I wanted to, but because I love my wife and daughter more than I love myself. And in hindsight, it was the smart thing to do. It was the sort of bridge that got me to the clinical trial drug that I'm on now. So, you never know when your family's going to step up and help you out. So
That's amazing. And you were outvoted anyway. So
it's like, what?
That's awesome. So the clinical trial, it's not chemo, it's something else, right? What is that all about?
It is. So the way cancer proliferates in the body is it secretes an enzyme or a protein that kind of hides it from your own immune system. And what this clinical trial drug does is that it does nothing to the cancer, but it goes in and removes that protein or that enzyme so that my own immune system, my own body, just like if you were to have a cold or a flu virus inside of you, your immune system would recognize it, say, hey, we need to attack it. That's what my body's doing. So my body now is recognizing my cancer. And for the last 4 years now, I've been on this trial drug, and it has kept I still have tumors in my lungs, but it has kept them at bay, it has kept them stable, and it has kept them from going anywhere else. So I've been very fortunate. Everybody else that was on the trial with me has passed away, and I don't know why it's working for me. The trial ended 2.5 years ago, but the company is being gracious enough to allow me to continue on the medication because it's helping me.
And what a gift that is, and that is amazing. So you're still continuously doing that. You are fighting a good fight. Good for you, staying positive. And through this 13-year battle with cancer, you have developed the 4 truths. Let's start with the first one. Control your mind, I believe, right?
Right. Yeah, the first one, I used to get asked, is one truth more important than the other? And I used to say, no, they're all equally important. But the more I read, the more I kind of went through my cancer journey and things like that, I thought, no, this very first one, control your mind or your mind will control you, I think is the most important one. And I learned, very early on that I needed to control my mind. I mentioned I was a college basketball player, but in high school, I had 3 knee surgeries. And I remember when I went back playing basketball after those knee surgeries, my brain was putting all kinds of negative thoughts into my mind. Things like, hey, you're probably a step slower since your surgeries and college coaches aren't going to be interested in recruiting you. And I remember thinking, wait a minute, I'm still playing at an elite level and colleges are still reaching out about the possibility of playing for their school. I learned early on that I needed to control the narrative that my brain was putting into my thoughts. The Cleveland Clinic estimates that we have about 60 to 70,000 thoughts that pass through our mind every day. About 3,500 of those thoughts are new thoughts, so not something we've already thought about. And then our brains operate at the speed of about 1,000 words a minute. Wow. But given all that, our mind can still only hold one thought at a time. Why would you want to make that a negative thought? I think the problem with most of us, and I am guilty of this many times in my life, is that we think with our fears and our insecurities instead of using our minds. I know I've done that. I know I've wanted to start a project, get involved in a business, and you kind of pull back and you're like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe I'm not smart enough, or maybe I don't have enough information, or what will people say about me if I fail? That's thinking with our fears or insecurities. That's not thinking with our minds. So I always tell, especially young people, when I have an opportunity to speak to them, if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you,
Yes.
go ahead and do it. Because
love
at
that.
the end of your life, the things you're going to regret are not going to be the things you did. They're going to be those things you didn't do.
Absolutely.
But then it's going to be too late to go back and do them.
Absolutely. You are absolutely right. And we are our worst enemy. We are absolutely our worst. If any of my friends, if anybody spoke to me like I speak to myself, like we wouldn't be friends. And why are we doing that to why are we doing that to ourselves, right? Like we are so mean to ourselves. Like what are we doing? So I love that. So control your mind, control your thoughts.
It's pretty simple, but it's a very hard thing to do because I think small minds and weak people kill big dreams. I think very few people ever contemplate what it means to be great at something purposeful in our lives. And we all become what we think. So be very careful. You mentioned that self-talk. Be very careful what you say to yourself because your mind doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's fantasy. So if you keep telling yourself like, hey, I can't do algebra. I'm terrible at algebra. I'm going to flunk algebra if you're taking an algebra class. Eventually the answer is going to be, yeah, you're right. You can't because you've already hardwired your brain to not be able to do it.
Henry Ford said, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
You're right. Yeah, yeah.
And that is such a good statement. Still true. And what about number 2?
Yeah, number two, pardon me. Embrace the pain and the difficulty that we all experience in life and use that pain and difficulty to make you a stronger and more resilient individual. Our brains are hardwired to avoid pain and discomfort and to seek pleasure. So to the brain, the status quo, the way things are right now, hey, it's comfortable, it's familiar, just leave it alone. But we all know this. The only way you're going to grow, the only way you're going to improve, the only way you're going to get better is if you step outside those comfort zones and do things that make you uncomfortable. When I was coaching girls' high school basketball, I used to constantly remind my players that they needed to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. We're all going to experience pain in our lives. And it doesn't have to be cancer pain or any kind of an illness you're dealing with. It can be as simple as you break up with your boyfriend or your girlfriend, or the flight you're leaving on to go on vacation gets canceled, or someone else at work gets the promotion that you deserve. Mm-hmm. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Suffering depends on what you do with that pain. Do you use it to make you a stronger and more resilient individual, or do you wallow in it and feel sorry for yourself and want other people to feel sorry for you? There's a great line from Ernest Hemingway in the book Farewell to Arms that I absolutely love. And the line is this: life breaks everyone. And afterward, many are stronger at the broken places. I love that line. And what I do, and you get like, okay, how do you use pain? And it's real simple. And I do this every day. So I'm going to recommend this to your audience. Every day of your life, do one thing that scares you, that makes you nervous, that makes you uncomfortable, that's potentially embarrassing. It doesn't have to be a big thing. But if you do those small things every day, when the big disasters in life hit us, and they hit all of us, we lose somebody who's close to us, we unexpectedly get let go from our job, we find out we have a chronic or a terminal illness, you will be so much more resilient to handle those things when they present themselves.
So that also comes with practice. Like you mentioned, do it and do the difficult things, do what's uncomfortable, and you're just going to be that much stronger. I love that. And what about number 3?
Yeah, number 3, I look at kind of as a legacy type of truth. What are you gonna leave when you're gone here? And the truth is this: what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. Most of us have either grown up with or heard about Fred Rogers. So Mr. Rogers on his television show, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, educated so many young people, including me, on public television. When Fred Rogers died in 2003, his family was going through his effects, and they found his wallet. And inside his wallet was a scrap piece of paper on which Mr. Rogers had written 4 simple words: life is for service. Deanna, I've seen so many people in my life that they feel that they're born empty. And that when they get out of school and they get into life, whatever that looks like for them, that they feel that their job then is to fill up their empty self. I've got to get the best job, make the most money, drive the nicest car, have the best family, have all the latest gadgets and gizmos. And what I found is we're not born empty. It's just the opposite. We're all born full with whatever we need in life to be successful already inside of us. We just need to find it, take it, pull it out, and use it for our benefit. So our job in life should not be to fill ourselves up. Our job in life should be to empty ourselves out with our unique gifts and talents, certainly for the betterment of ourselves, but also for the betterment of our families, of our friends, and of our communities. And I think once you make that paradigm shift in your mind, it's not about what I can get, because there's always going to be one more thing. If I have that, then I'll be happy. But then you get it and you're not happy. It's not about getting stuff. Really what it's about, leaving that legacy, is about what you leave to other people in terms of your knowledge, your skill, your values, and things like that.
That's so powerful. And you're absolutely right. It is about what we can give of ourselves. And what about truth number 4?
And truth number 4, I think, is, pretty self-explanatory. It's as long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. And the way that truth resonates with me is this. Someday my pain is going to end. It may end through surgery. It may end through the development of some kind of new medication. Quite frankly, it may end when I die. But if I quit, if I give up, if I give into pain, then pain will always be a part of my life. I'm going to tell you a story now. It's going to start out kind of weird, but hang with me on this.
Okay.
So the true story, back in the 1950s at Johns Hopkins University here in the US, there was a professor that was doing an experiment with rats. And he wanted to see how long the average rat could tread water. So he put rats in a tank of water that was over their head. And the average rat treaded water for about 15 minutes. And just as those rats were getting ready to sink and drown, he reached in, grabbed them, pulled them out, dried them off, and let them rest for a while. And then he put the exact same rats in that exact same tank of water. And the second time around, on average, those rats treaded water for 60 hours.
What?
Yeah, exactly. That's what everybody said. 15 minutes? Well, wait a minute. 15 minutes? It wasn't like, your marriage was going to fail or your business was going to go under or you were going to flunk a test. You were going to die. It was over. Yeah. And the second time around, 60 hours, which taught me 2 things. Number 1, the importance of hope in our lives. That if we know we're doing the right things, nothing's 100%. Maybe not today, maybe not this month, maybe not even this year. But there's a good chance if you're doing the right things, you're staying on the right path, that you'll get to where you want to be. And the second thing it taught me was just how much more our physical bodies can handle than we ever thought they could. Now, don't get me wrong. I think we all have a breaking point, and I think that breaking point is so much farther, down the road than we ever thought it could. And I'm going to bring it back full circle to control your mind. We quit, we give up, we give in because our brains tell us this hurts, it's uncomfortable, and we should stop. If you can push past that brain telling you this, that you don't like this and we should stop, you will be so much more resilient. So don't listen to your brain, control your brain, and your physical body will come along right with it.
We can do so much more than we think we can. That's incredible.
Absolutely.
That is I never thought I would learn so much from a rat. That's so great. So Terry, now you wrote a very powerful book called Sustainable Excellence. This is what ChatGPT has to say about your book. It's not just another self-help fluff piece. It's a no-nonsense guide that challenges you to confront your fears, embrace discomfort, and take ownership of your life's direction. 10 principles designed to build a rock-solid foundation of beliefs and behaviors, pushing you to rise above mediocrity and truly excel. He emphasizes that excellence isn't a one-time achievement, but a sustained effort requiring relentless commitment and resilience. This book dares you to question the current path and equips you with the tools to forge an extraordinary life, no matter the obstacles. I would love to hear more about this. I know you are in it to change people's lives, and I can't wait to hear about the book. It had 10 principles in it. Let's dive into at least a few so we can create some value for the audience.
Absolutely. So, sustainable excellence, I never expected to write a book, never wanted to write a book. There's sort of an old joke that says when we talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia. So God never told me, to write a book. But I think what God has done, and he's done this several times in my life, where he puts enough people in my path that start making the same suggestion over and over and over again. And I think I'm old enough now and mature enough that I pay attention to that when it happens. And so people were saying that you should write a book, you should write a book. So Sustainable Excellence was really a book born out of two conversations I had. One was with a former player that I had coached in high school who'd moved to the area in Colorado where my wife and I live with her fiance, and the four of us had dinner one night. And I remember saying to her after dinner that I was excited that she was living close and I could watch her find and live her purpose. And Deanna, she looked at me and she was like, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have absolutely no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the reason you were put on the face of this earth, and there is a reason, using your unique gifts and talents and living that reason. So that was one conversation. And then I had a young man in college reach out to me on social media, and he wanted to know what I thought were the most important things that he should learn, not to just be successful in his job or in business, but to be successful in life. And I didn't want to give him the, get up early, work hard, help others. I didn't want to give him the cliches that we all know. So I wanted to go deeper. So I took some notes and eventually kind of had these 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles. So I sent them to him. And then I stepped back and I was like, well, I got a life story that fits underneath that principle, or I've got somebody that I know that fits underneath this principle. So literally during the 4 to 5 month period where I was healing after I had my leg amputated, I sat down at the computer and I built stories, and they're real stories about real people underneath each of the principles. And that's how Sustainable Excellence came to be. So diving into them, if you'd like.
Yes, please.
So we already covered one. Most people think with their fears and their insecurities instead of using their minds. That's absolutely one. There's another one that I absolutely love that is you are the person you're looking to become. And I put that in there because I'd always wanted to be in law enforcement. But my grandfather had been a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954. And in 1933, he was shot in the line of duty. It was not a serious injury. He was shot in the ankle. But my dad, who was an infant at the time, always remembered the stories my grandmother told of that knock on the door of, Mrs. Tucker, grab your son, come with us, your husband's been shot. And so when I expressed an interest in sort of following my grandfather's footsteps, my dad was, absolutely not. You're going to college. You're going to major in business. You're going to get out, get a great job, get married, have 2.4 kids, and live happily ever after. But that's what my father wanted me to do. That's not what I felt my purpose in life was. So I had a choice when I graduated from college. My dad was dying of cancer. Mm-hmm. I could have said, hey, Dad, no, you're dying. Sorry. I'm going to go blaze my own trail and get into law enforcement. Or out of love and respect for you, I will do what you want me to do. So understanding that backstory, my first 2 jobs were in business because that's what my dad wanted me to do. Then I joke, I did what every good son did. I waited till my father passed away and followed my own dreams. But even when I was in business, I felt I was a police officer. So you are the person you're looking to become. Even if you're not that person, you are that person.
I love that. And just to add to that, so when I was young and I worked as an administrator, I was just a receptionist. And so very low level job. And somebody said to me, act, feel, dress like the person that you want to be, like the career that you want to be. It doesn't matter where you are now. It doesn't matter that you are sitting behind a desk answering phones right now. Dress and be that person that you want to be. And I thought it was really, really good advice. It just put you into that mindset. And you started your career at 37. So you finally followed your dreams. Unfortunately, your dad passed away at 37 years old, where most people would be, holy cow, I'm too old.
Yeah, especially that career. I mean, law enforcement, it's a physically demanding job. I know I took a lot more Tylenol in the police academy than my younger counterparts. But you're right. At 37, that's... A lot of people would say that's too old to be getting into that line of work, but it was just, I knew it was something I was going to do. I just didn't know when it was going to be.
But you went for it. I love that. And so do you have another principle that you'd like to share before we move on?
Sure. I'll give you the last one. And
yes, please do.
It's this. it's love is the most important word in any language. And guys don't talk about love. It's not something that we're all comfortable with. But when I was growing up, I was a big fan of John Wooden, who was the basketball coach at UCLA. And I remember listening to Coach Wooden give an interview to a reporter. And I had a pad of paper and a pencil. I'm like, all right, Coach, come on, give me some good X's and O's that I can use when I practice. And the reporter asked him, what do you want your players to understand or to take away from your program? And I'm on the edge of my seat, Dan, and I'm like, all right, come on, Coach, give me something good. And he's like, I want my players to understand the importance of love. And I was like, no, that's not something I want. Come on, Coach, I'm 13 years old. Give me something good. What I didn't understand is what he was saying was, I want my players to understand that they need to love what they do, that they need to love the team that they're on, that they need to love their teammates, and that carries over way past basketball, way past sports in any capacity whatsoever. That love, what love in our world, we need more love. We need more caring. And I always think about the spiritual definition of love, which is willing the good of the other. It's not a romantic kind of love. It's, I want what's best for you. I want what you want out of life. And I think that principle, I think, is probably the most important one in the book.
And it comes from here. And that is such a beautiful thing. And that should be for everything that we do. And
Agreed.
That is a really important principle. I'm so glad you shared that with us. And now I couldn't wait to get this started. SWAT hostage negotiator. My goodness. So this would be like good for anybody. I mean, if you're in business, you're negotiating. If you're you have a 4-year-old, 5-year-old teenager, you're negotiating. I'm sorry, that's what's happening. Your life is full of negotiations. Whatever we want to accomplish in our life, wherever we want to, there is a disconnect or anything like this, it's tools that we will absolutely need. So please share with us and teach us some of the basics on what we can do to apply to our life.
Sure, absolutely. You're right. We negotiate all the time. We just don't call it that, and we don't realize that we're doing it. So I'll give you the first thing that I got when I became a negotiator, and it was the formula that we use as human beings to communicate with each other. Not police or anything like that, but just human beings. And the formula was 7-38-55. So 7% of how a message comes across when we're talking with another person are the words that we use. And think how many times we're like, ooh, I wish I hadn't have said that, or I wish I would have said that differently. Mm-hmm. That's only 7% of how that message comes across. 38% is the tone of voice that you use with that message. Are you really excited and you're talking fast and everything's going? Or are you kind of Eeyore-ish, no, this is not good and things about. So 38% is that tone of voice. And 55%, so more than half of how a message is communicated, is our body language and our facial expressions.
Wow.
And they gave us that formula because if somebody was barricaded with a gun in a room, I was not in the room with that person. That wouldn't have been safe. And so they gave us that to realize that when we were negotiating, we didn't have that 55%. We didn't have the luxury of saying something to somebody and see them kind of roll their eyes like, oh, what an idiot, Terry. I can't believe you said that to me. Mm-hmm. So we had to get good based on what people were saying, certainly, but also what they weren't saying and how they were saying it. So that's something to keep in mind when you're communicating with somebody. If you and I are talking and you're on your phone like this,
yes.
Well, what body language is that saying to me? It's me. Deanna doesn't care what I'm saying. She's not even paying attention to me in that.
Absolutely. So this is super important. So 7% is the words, and we now choose to communicate mostly how? Emails, text messages,
emojis.
Right? And it's like, so we are losing a huge percentage of our communication and how we truly want to communicate with people. And that is so unfortunate. So thank you so much for sharing that, because that's massively important. So if you need to email, maybe make a call instead. If you need to make a call, maybe even see somebody in person instead. You will be that much more powerful. Love that. What else can you share?
So a lot of times we would get on scene and have no idea why we were there, what precipitated this. And let's face it, if you're talking to me and your house is surrounded by the police, you're probably having the worst day of your life, So we would start out with what we used to call tactical empathy. First thing, I wouldn't, if I was negotiating with somebody, I wouldn't say that I was even the police or that I was, officer or sergeant or whatever. I would say, hi, I'm Terry. What do you want me, what's your name? And a lot of times you don't even know my name. Okay, what would you like me to call you? So we're trying to figure things out. So we used what was called tactical empathy. I think today you can get rid of the word tactical and just talk about empathy.
Empathy, yeah.
And here's what I mean by that. Help me to understand what's going on or where you're coming from. And the important word there is understand. If I was negotiating with somebody that was, just murdered 3 people and was a homicide suspect, I was going to say, oh yeah, I totally agree. You should have done that. So it's not an agreement. It's an understanding. And today, especially in the political climate we have here in the United States, we're screaming at each other. I'm right, you're wrong. You're right, I'm wrong. Well, whatever it is, we can't understand each other. We may agree to disagree, but if I can get you to help me understand where you're coming from, I'm building a relationship and I'm building trust. And everything we did as negotiators was about building a relationship with a human being that was having the worst day of their life that we had never met before.
Wow.
And can you imagine how hard that is?
It's impossible.
That's why they would take, negotiations would take hours.
Yeah.
So we're trying to understand, because understanding leads to trust, and trust leads me to a point where I can get you out safely, hopefully. One of the other things I talk about are the kind of questions that we would use. We would use how and what questions. We would stay away from why questions. So it may be like, if I said to you, Deanna, why did you wear that dress today? You'd be like, oh, wait a minute. Does Terry not like my dress? Is there something wrong with that? Why is triggered when we're kids? Because what do our parents say to us? Why did you do that?
Yeah.
Why did you, dump your milk on the floor? So why sounds accusatory.
Absolutely.
I can get to the same answer if I say, Deanna, what made you wear that dress today? That's a little softer of a question. Mm-hmm. And so how and what questions were things we used. We were always taught to be curious. We were always, oh, you don't think you can do that? And then go silent. And I'll give you a kind of an interesting tip, and this works for everybody. If somebody says something, somebody says, I hate the dress you're wearing, or you're impossible to deal with, or whatever. If you don't react emotionally, and if you just say something to the effect of, you seem to have a reason for saying that, and then go silent, you take the power back. Because now they've got to explain themselves. Not only do they have to explain themselves, you get more information.
Yes.
About maybe they're just having a bad day and you don't have to go off on them. Or maybe they can't stand you and they say something that, I had no idea that I offended you in that way, whatever it is. So that's just a little technique you can use. Silence is an amazing thing. I can talk your ear off, and I've probably proven that in this podcast.
No, this is great.
But I can also listen and use silence. Human beings don't like silence. If you go silent, the other person will start talking. The more they talk, the more information you get.
There's such a power in silence, and I love that you brought that up because not enough people talk about it. Yeah. And there's almost more power in silence than talking. Thank you so much for bringing that up because that's massive. And then there's things like mirroring as well. There is that I believe in part of the negotiations, right?
Exactly. I mean, one of the big things, again, we're trying to build trust. I mean, any good relationship is based on trust. Parent, child, husband, wife, boss, subordinate. If you don't trust those people, it's not a good relationship. So you had to, and this is why hostage negotiation was so exhausting. You had to get down in the weeds with these people. So if somebody was yelling and screaming and ranting and raving about, let's say, their mother, and you said something like, well, it seems you're a little upset with your mother. No, you totally missed where they're coming from. You sound like you're really pissed at your mother. Yeah, I am. And that gets the person to say, yeah, Terry gets me. He understands where I'm coming from. And again, understanding leads to trust. Trust leads me to get you out safely. So you've got to figure out what the emotion is, and then you've got to label it. And you've got to be accurate with that label. If you miss it, they're like, yeah, Terry doesn't get me. He's not listening to what I'm saying. Doesn't he understand? All the things that we would say. if we were, talking to somebody and we were upset with somebody like that. So, and the last thing I'll tell you this, and when I first heard this, I thought, you're nuts. Because a lot of times we were blocks away talking to somebody on the phone. And we were always taught when we started to talk to somebody to smile. Mm-hmm. And we're like, smile? The person can't see us. We're 2 blocks away. Why do you smile? It comes across over the phone. Yeah. And it comes across in person as well. We have what's called mirror neurons in our brains, so that if I smile at you, there's a good chance you won't even realize it. Your mirror neurons will engage and they'll smile back at me. Now all of a sudden I've turned kind of a sourpuss look, into a smile just by me smiling at you.
Wow. And you don't think about it, especially when people don't see you, when you're just on the phone and you don't think about smiling, but it absolutely comes across in your voice. So that is fantastic. Is there anything else you want to cover from that experience being a hostage negotiator?
Yeah, let me say this. A lot of times we get, you better give me a car out front or I'm going to kill a hostage. Give me a car by 1 o'clock. Deadlines were almost, as a matter of fact, I can't tell you any time where a deadline was met, where, they did what they said they would do at the deadline. We would just wait till like 2 minutes before the deadline, then we call them back. So now they're talking to us and the deadline passes and stuff like that. But let me say this, and think about, and I'll tell you why I say this. Think about this. A yes without a how is a no. So think how many times, you get that robocall and somebody's trying to sell you siding or a new roof or a paint job or whatever it is. And sometimes we're so sick of it, we just say, yeah, sure, fine. But there's no how to it. There's no, I'll talk to your service manager and we'll set up a time and you can come out. The how part is missing. That works in negotiation, especially with business. If somebody just says yes to you, but there's no way to put that yes into action, that's a no. So a yes without a how is a no.
Interesting.
And the other thing I'll end on this. We like the negative because the negative keeps us, what you think, out of trouble. Well, if I just say no, then I'm not committed. I don't have to do it. In your interactions with people, use the negative. Would this not...
would you oppose to?
Yeah,
or...
would you be opposed to talking right now? Things like that. Would you be opposed to having my service manager call you? Use the negative, because no, I wouldn't be opposed at all. It makes you feel, it's kind of a psychological trick. It makes you feel like you're still in control, even though you've just committed to do something. Brilliant. But it still makes you feel like you're in control. So use the negative. It works with your family, it works in business, it works at school. Use the negative. Ask the question expecting a negative answer. Not like, is it a good time now? Is now not a good time for you? That's lets them feel like they're in control.
I just recently actually learned that. So, and because my whole thing is when I make a call, my first thing, is it a good time right now? And for me, now I'm in the back of my mind, I'm trying to shift that. I'm trying to say, is it a bad time right now?
Exactly.
Right. So I'm trying to kind of shift it so they say no to me instead of yes. So I love that. That is so interesting because I am trying to shift it myself. Because I'm always looking at ways to communicate better, to be a better communicator, to be a better negotiator. I actually have a certification negotiating expert for the real estate business. So, and I have learned a lot of that as well, but it's really interesting to put it into practice and do such incredible things with people and being able to negotiate major deals for people and finding, and it's almost like you think empathy, and it's finding that balance. It's not about take. It's about, okay, if I work through this, will you be able to offer me this? And it's about that balance. And I call it like playing badminton or playing tennis. You go back and forth. Empathy, understanding, and what about this? What about this? And you kind of create that dance. Is that something that you feel is kind of where maybe we're on the right track here?
Absolutely. I mean, again, we're trying to develop trust. And one of the things we never did with somebody was lie to them. I mean, people would say to us all the time, hey, I'll come out, but you got to promise me that I'm not going to go to jail. And we would say something like, really? I mean, I've been honest with you through this whole thing. Yeah. And now, what do you want me to lie to you? Oh, well, Well, yeah, I guess I got to go to jail. It's like, yeah, unfortunately, you're going to have to go to jail. But then we would try to deflect the conversation to something more palatable because, and people are like, well, why didn't you lie to people? Well, we didn't lie to them because a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, and this absolutely happened, we might be back negotiating with the exact same person about the same thing. Maybe his mother was what triggered this. I grabbed a gun and put myself in my room and barricaded myself. Well, mom's still alive and mom's still pushing his buttons. But if he ever thought that I lied to him, and a lot of times we would start the negotiation with, look, I want this to be fair. Mm-hmm. So if at any time during this you think I'm lying to you, if you think I'm not treating you fairly, I want you to call me out on it.
Love it.
And we would say that. And so understanding that, we're not going to lie to you because there's a good chance a year from now we're going to be back right here. And if you felt we lied to you, I've lost all credibility. I mean, it would be like if your spouse cheated on you. Yeah, you might forgive him, but at the same time, would you trust him? I don't know. That would be hard. And especially in something like this. Sometimes, a spouse could be life and death too, but this is life and death. This is somebody, with a gun or that wants to hurt people. So absolutely not. We never lied to people. And that works in a negotiation. If you're trying to buy a car, stuff like, the sleazy salesman, I'm like, this guy sounds like he's trying to get over on me. You don't have a good feeling about that. No. If you don't have a good feeling, there's much less chance you're going to buy that car.
No, you're absolutely right. And that is such a good point. And it is truly about being honest and being truthful. And I love that. And that really makes a lot of sense. And I think we can apply to a lot of our business dealings, a lot of our family and so forth with that. Communication is such key. And we're losing skills. We're losing our communication skills these days. Speaking of communication, you mentioned you were on 700 podcasts, speaking engagements, and all these different. Why are you doing so many? I'm thinking it's making a difference. I loved speaking with you today, and I've learned something, and I think that stuff is so educational and so impactful. Why do you do it? Why do you feel that you're going to take time out of your day? You're going to be on 700 speaking engagements. That's incredible.
Yeah, it is. And I never started out to, there's no number. I'm not looking to, set a world record or do anything like that. It's just, if I feel that the person has a good show that I can make a positive difference on, then I feel I've learned some things. And I don't know everything, but I've learned some things during my life, during my cancer journey, that I just like to offer to people. And Deanna, when I did my first podcast, I'll show you what an idiot I was. I started a speaking business and then COVID hit and everything shut down. Nothing virtual, nothing in person. And a friend of mine reached out and said, hey, would you like to be a guest on my podcast? I was like, sure. What's a podcast? I had no idea what a podcast was. And he explained it to me, and I said, okay, I'll try. And Deanna, I was terrible. I provided absolutely zero value to the audience. I had Post-it notes all around the camera, and he'd ask me a question, and I'd kind of lean in, and I'd read one of the Post-it notes. I was terrible.
I'm so going to find this one. I am so going to.
It's even up yet.
I love it.
But I was like, okay, I kind of like the format. And I thought, well, the first time I drove a car, was I any good at it? No. The first time I cooked a meal, I think I burned the water. The first time I studied algebra, I was not good at it.
Yeah.
But I wanted to get good at it. So I listened to all the podcasts I've been on. How many times do I say hum or those filler words? Do I have a better story? Can I get that story more concise? How can I be a better guest so the host feels that this was time well spent and their audience gets value out of what we're talking about?
And that's what I'm doing here too. I'm new at this. This is not comfortable for me. I want to get out of my comfort zone. I want to do something beautiful. I want to share other people's stories. And I so appreciate you doing that. And I think you articulate yourself beautifully. And I think you have an immense amount of value. And I so appreciate you being here and being able to offer that time and the value and the knowledge. And I can't thank you enough, Terry.
Well, Deanna, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed talking with you today.
Having Terry on here was such a blessing. I hope that you got a lot of value. You learned how to communicate, negotiate, and also the mindset shift that you can do to create absolutely anything in life, overcome any challenges. I mean, Terry's literally fighting for his life, and I have not met many people as positive and as courageous as him. Now, Terry made it very clear he's not here to flog his book. However, if you want to support him or you feel that this book will bring some value to you or someone you know, I will make sure to leave a link below. And thank you for joining me. I'm Deanna Kleine with The Wealthy Acre.